Before I start talking about what the First Nations ate, I'd like to say that I could find little to no useful information, and so some of the things I say might not be accurate or true. So yeah, otherwise onward. The First Nations usually ate whatever was around them, and like a First Nations group, specifically the Métis, they usually ate food that came from that were like in result of farming, fishing, gathering, hunting, etc. Because they didn't like live in Arctic like environment, unlike the Inuit. And so the animals they commonly hunted were the Inuit. Bison, on the other hand, as I mentioned, rabbit, ducks. They lived in Arctic and like environment, and so they usually hunted animals and such as polar bears, caribou, and seal. And like they couldn't exactly farm because obviously their territory is covered in snow, and so plants cannot grow, or so I'm assuming. When the First Nations harvest their meat, they tend to use all of the animal without wasting any of said animal, which I think is very cool of them. For instance, they would use the skin of the animal to make their clothing, furniture, and anything similar to what I mentioned. They would also make use of the animal's bones by using said bones to make their weapons. They also had this tool called the ulu, which was used by the Inuit and other groups, I believe, to prepare their food. To me, the ulu kind of reminds me of a pizza cutter, and according to Wikipedia, the ulu is traditionally used by women, though my other sources don't really mention that, so I am not sure. Anyway, the First Nations made use of the herbs they found around them, and stating the blatant obvious, they use these herbs for medicinal purposes as well as spiritual, I believe. These herbs include tobacco, sweetgrass, cedar, and sage. I also found this quote unquote folk tale about how they discovered one of their herbs and how to use said herb. The story goes like this. A person named Lastcalf helps Beaver out by feeding said beaver. The beaver decided to express its gratitude by giving Lastcalf a vision that led to Lastcalf finding a cure for the ailment they had. That being tuberculosis, I believe. The vision Lastcalf had instructed them to boil a pitch of lodge pine in water and then drink the infusion after singing a special song. After following the instructions, Lastcalf was cured. And of course, we heard the scurvy story. Also, fun fact, the Inuit found tobacco to be the most sacred herb out of the few I mentioned. And I believe I cannot confirm if it's the same for the other First Nations groups, but yeah. So the first and most obvious difference is that we have supermarkets, and we do not have to hunt to get food. And we don't exactly prepare food over a live fire. We have fridges, stoves, and microwaves, which reheat/cook our foods in a more convenient manner. So that concludes my presentation on what the First Nations ate.